I never imagined a quiet Sunday morning could feel like a storm, yet here I am, standing frozen in the hallway of my childhood home, gripping a stack of papers that could ruin everything, my hands shaking because I know what I have just seen, and it is not a mistake. It is deliberate, calculated, and frightening. My name is Lila Harper, I am 28, a careful thinker and someone who trusts easily, but now, I feel my judgment faltering as I stare at my cousin, Amelia's signature scrawled across documents that belong to our family estate, a signature that should not exist. A signature forged to claim an inheritance that does not belong to her. I remember how my uncle used to warn me about greed hiding behind familiar faces, but I laughed it off because our family was supposed to be trustworthy. A unit that protected each other in ways money could never measure, yet here I am, confronted with proof that loyalty can be faked, that blood does not always guarantee honesty. I feel my pulse accelerate as I quietly step into the study where my uncle waits, his eyes narrowing the moment he sees the papers, and I can sense his disappointment, his mind working faster than I can follow, a mix of anger and sorrow flashing across his face. The thought of confronting Amelia fills me with dread, because I know she will deny everything, claim innocence with a smile that once seemed kind. And yet my gut tells me that this deception has been brewing for months, maybe years, hidden beneath polite conversations and birthday celebrations. I take a deep breath, trying to steady myself, remembering how my father used to tell me that courage is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite it, and I force my legs to carry me closer to my uncle, who holds a pen in his hand almost like a weapon, ready to expose the truth. My mind races, imagining the confrontation that will follow, wondering how my own family could bend rules for greed, and thinking about what it will mean for trust, for loyalty, for all of us who once believed that family always protects family. The air feels heavy, thick with anticipation, and I realize that whatever decision is made in the next few moments will change everything. Perhaps forever, because secrets of this magnitude do not vanish quietly, they demand reckoning. My uncle looks at me, his voice low but firm, warning me to keep calm, yet I see the edge in his eyes that tells me nothing will remain the same, that justice and betrayal are dancing dangerously close in the same room. And I feel a chill as I brace myself for what comes next, knowing that a single mistake, a single word, could tip the balance and reveal the full scope of the deception, leaving all of us exposed. I hold my breath, heart hammering, the papers trembling in my hands, and I know the moment has arrived where truth will collide with greed, where family loyalty will be tested beyond imagination. And I whisper to myself, a trembling thought that I hope will be enough to guide me, because what happens in the next heartbeat will define everything for the rest of our lives. Looking back, I realize the roots of this mess were planted long before the forged signatures appeared. In quiet moments, when favoritism and unspoken rivalries silently shaped our family. And I can see now how the cracks in trust started forming as early as my teenage years, when my uncle always praised Amelia for her charm and quick thinking while I was quietly handling responsibilities. The kind that went unnoticed yet kept the family functioning. And at the time, I told myself it did not matter, that being diligent and careful was more important than attention or applause. But deep down I resented the way accomplishments were measured in smiles and praise instead of effort. And I never voiced it because confrontation had always felt dangerous in our household, a place where appearances mattered more than honesty. I think about my parents, how their deaths left me relying on my uncle as both guardian and guide, and how he tried to teach me that family is more than blood, that loyalty is earned through integrity and consistency. Yet I also saw the subtle ways he tolerated Amelia's manipulations, laughing off small lies and overlooked mistakes. And it made me question whether I was imagining the difference in treatment or if it was real. A quiet injustice that I bottled inside. Friends at work notice my seriousness and focus, often teasing me for being too rigid or cautious. And they do not understand how deeply family dynamics haunt me, how a single misstep at home feels heavier than any professional failure. Yet they are the only ones I share fragments of my life with, the ones who see me beyond the composed facade I present during meetings. The ones who listen when I replay past arguments and incidents, analyzing every word and glance for hidden meaning. Even Amelia herself presents a facade that is impossible to read, a mixture of sweetness and cunning that I have learned to mistrust, and although I want to believe in her goodness, I cannot escape the unease that follows every interaction, a tension that makes my stomach twist even when she smiles innocently. I reflect on the unspoken rules of our family, the way ambition and desire for inheritance quietly shape behaviors, and how small acts of deception, the ones that seemed harmless at the time, can grow into dangerous schemes when left unchecked. And I realize that my uncle, intervention today may only be the first chapter in a long struggle to preserve fairness and truth, a struggle that will demand choices I am not yet ready to make. Because loyalty, greed, and love are entangled in ways that complicate every decision, I cannot stop thinking about the moments that led here, the subtle competitions, the comparisons, the whispered encouragements and quiet criticisms that shaped us all, and I feel a weight in my chest, knowing that the next confrontation will test not just Amelia, not just my uncle, but every relationship I hold dear, forcing hidden truths into the light and challenging bonds that have felt unbreakable for years. And as I sit in my quiet living room after the storm of revelations, I cannot help but wonder who will emerge stronger, who will falter, and who will cross a line that cannot be undone, because family is never just about love, it is also about power, trust, and the silent battles fought behind closed doors. I had thought seeing the forged signatures would be enough to shock me, to make the problem tangible and solvable, but the reality is far worse. Because now I am trapped between exposing Amelia and protecting the fragile bonds of a family that has always defined who I am, and my mind races as I consider the consequences of every possible action, knowing that one wrong move could ruin relationships I cannot replace, while doing nothing feels like betrayal to myself and to my uncle, who trusted me to see the truth. As I sit at the edge of the study chair watching Amelia move through the house with an effortless charm, I notice how her laughter echoes in hallways that suddenly feel oppressive, a reminder that appearances can hide dangerous intentions, and I realize that the same hands that once played with mine in childhood now hold the power to deceive, manipulate, and claim what is not theirs. My uncle hovers near the doorway, silent but observant, his gaze weighing on me with a mix of expectation and caution, as if he knows I am struggling to decide where loyalty should fall, whether to confront Amelia now or wait for more proof. And the pressure makes my chest tighten with every heartbeat, a physical reminder that moral dilemmas are rarely neat or easy, and courage often comes with cost. I replay every recent interaction with Amelia, searching for the subtle hints I ignored, the half-truths that now scream their meaning. The moments when she seemed overly eager to help, when she smiled too widely at discussions of the estate, when she steered conversations away from accountability, and I feel a wave of nausea realizing I was naive enough to trust her instincts as kindness, not strategy. Outside, the late afternoon sun slants through the windows, casting shadows that seem to mirror my conflicted thoughts, a reminder that even light cannot fully illuminate hidden motives, and I hear the faint sound of my phone buzzing with messages from friends and colleagues who expect updates about work, completely unaware that my personal world is collapsing in slow motion, that every choice I make now is entangled with ethics, family loyalty, and greed. The documents in my hands feel heavier than ever, a symbol of the truth I am not ready to unleash. A proof that carries not just legal weight but the burden of relationships. And as I glance at Amelia approaching the study, cheerful and unsuspecting, I feel the first tremors of panic, a question forming in my mind that I cannot yet answer. Do I risk confrontation and risk shattering everything? Or do I watch silently and wait for further evidence, knowing that waiting might allow her scheme to grow, and that inaction may be as damning as action? My uncle finally speaks, his voice low but sharp, a subtle command hidden in his words that tells me he is testing my resolve. Watching how I navigate this moral maze, and in that moment I feel the weight of history, expectation, and impending revelation crushing my calm, forcing my internal battle into overdrive, because every instinct screams that betrayal is closer than I thought. That trust has already been broken, and that the first choice I make in this storm will shape every decision that comes after. Leaving me suspended in fear, doubt, and anticipation, staring at the door where Amelia is about to enter. Unsure if I am prepared to face the consequences of uncovering the truth, I made the decision to confront Amelia quietly, thinking I could manage the truth without triggering a storm, but as soon as I approached her in the living room holding the documents like fragile evidence, I felt the entire house shift, the air thick with unspoken threats and the weight of history pressing down on every word I might speak. And I realized immediately that my attempt to control the situation was a mistake because she smiled too easily, a calm that seemed rehearsed, and I felt a chill knowing she already anticipated my move, her eyes flickering with calculation as if she had rehearsed every response I might give, leaving me scrambling for words while my pulse hammered in my ears. My uncle watches from the hallway, silent but unrelenting, his presence a reminder that the family's expectations are not mine alone to bear. And I sense the tension between us stretching taut, a tightrope of loyalty and responsibility that threatens to snap under the weight of this revelation. while Amelia leans slightly closer, her voice deceptively gentle, asking questions that sound innocent but carry hidden implications, and I feel my confidence crumble, unsure if I am being manipulated or if my own nerves are exaggerating the danger, every sentence a potential misstep that could make this worse. I think about the inheritance, the way money and property have always stirred quiet rivalries in the family, and I realize that Amelia's scheme is not just a simple act of greed. It is a strategic play that could shift loyalties, destroy trust, and reshape the family entirely. And knowing that I have no proof beyond these papers makes me feel powerless, despite my role in uncovering her deception. The pressure builds when a phone call interrupts the confrontation, a message from a lawyer confirming that signatures must be verified, and suddenly the stakes feel higher than ever, because exposure is imminent. And one slip could ruin reputations and ignite conflicts that have simmered silently for years. I feel my mind spinning, trying to balance honesty, caution, and the desire to protect family bonds. While every glance from Amelia and my uncle feels like a test, each second a countdown to disaster. And I notice subtle shifts in Amelia's posture, her confidence masking anxiety, and I wonder if she is bluffing, if her charm is a shield or a weapon, and whether confronting her directly will end the scheme or make it spiral faster than I can control. My own uncertainty gnaws at me, reminding me that decisions made in haste can have consequences far beyond the moment, yet inaction feels equally dangerous, because trust has already been broken and someone must act before this deception spreads further, threatening not just finances, but the core of who we are as a family. As Amelia reaches for a cup of tea, her hand brushing mine in an almost casual gesture, I feel a cold knot in my stomach, knowing that the next words I speak will determine whether I regain control or lose it entirely. And the tension is so thick it feels suffocating, the room charged with anticipation. Every heartbeat counting down toward revelation, betrayal, or catastrophe, leaving me suspended in fear and anticipation, unable to predict whether the next move will be a victory, a disaster, or something far worse, because in this house, nothing is ever simple, and every secret has a price yet to be paid. Just when I thought I had the upper hand, holding the documents like proof of betrayal, Amelia's expression shifted in a way I could not anticipate, a mixture of fear and defiance that made me pause. And in that hesitation, my uncle stepped forward. His voice calm but sharp, revealing a fact that made my chest tighten and my mind race, because it was something I never suspected. Something that turned everything I thought I knew on its head. The signatures I had been staring at, the scheme I believed Amelia had orchestrated alone, were actually forged not by her, but by someone else entirely. Someone whose motives were hidden behind layers of manipulation and decades of family politics. And suddenly the web of deceit felt far larger than I had imagined. Shock and disbelief collided in me, my heartbeat echoing in my ears as I tried to reconcile what I had assumed with what I was being told. While Amelia's eyes filled with a mixture of relief and resentment, as if years of false accusations had been weighing her down. And I realized in that moment how fragile assumptions are when faced with truth, how easy it is to misjudge intentions when you are blinded by your own certainty. My uncle's revelation came in pieces carefully measured, showing that the inheritance had always been at risk, not from greed alone but from hidden alliances and long-standing disputes. Secrets kept from me to protect me from family conflicts I was not ready to handle, yet the weight of knowing now made it impossible to return to ignorance, and I felt a wave of guilt, anger, and confusion all at once, because I had confronted Amelia as if she were guilty. And in doing so, I had exposed vulnerabilities that went far beyond signatures and money. I stared at the papers again, seeing them in a new light, each mark carrying a different meaning, a different story. And I understood that the real challenge was not just detecting deception but navigating the complicated web of trust, loyalty, and ambition that had been woven long before I arrived, and that now demanded choices I could not take lightly. As the room settled into a tense quiet, I noticed subtle shifts in body language, the way Amelia avoided direct eye contact with my uncle, the slight tremor in his hands, the way the afternoon sun cast shadows that seemed to stretch longer than they should. And I realized that revelation did not equal resolution, that understanding the truth was only the first step, and that every reaction from that point on would carry consequences that could not be undone. My own emotions churned, from relief that Amelia was not the mastermind, to frustration at my own misjudgment, to the nagging suspicion that the real puppeteer was still out of sight, manipulating events from behind the scenes. And I knew that this story was far from over. That trust had been shaken, and that the next steps would test courage, strategy, and loyalty in ways I was only beginning to comprehend, leaving me suspended on the edge of fear, curiosity, and anticipation. Heart racing, mind spinning, staring at Amelia and my uncle and wondering what hidden truths might still surface, because in this family, nothing is ever what it seems, and every revelation is only the beginning of a deeper, more dangerous game. The weight of the revelation pressed on me like a physical force, and I realized that there was only one path forward. A choice that would not only define my relationship with Amelia and my uncle but also determine my own moral standing in a family tangled with secrets, manipulations, and silent rivalries. And I felt my hands tighten around the documents as I tried to steady my racing thoughts, knowing that hesitation could make the situation spiral beyond my control. I took a deep breath and considered every possible outcome. Exposing the real forger would bring clarity and justice, but it would also ignite conflicts that might never heal, shattering trust and potentially alienating the people I love most. While staying silent could preserve family unity in the short term but leave deception unchecked. A quiet poison that could resurface later in more damaging ways. And I felt the paradox weigh heavily on my heart because neither choice felt entirely right or safe. I looked at Amelia, whose eyes held a mixture of anxiety and hope, and I realized that she, like me, had been caught in a system that rewarded cunning and punished caution. And I felt a surprising surge of empathy, understanding that forgiveness and strategy could coexist if approached carefully, but only if I acted decisively and transparently with my uncle, whose experience and insight I could not ignore. I chose to confront the real source of the forgery, gathering evidence and speaking with my uncle first to create a plan that protected everyone as much as possible, knowing that this decision would risk anger, resentment, and strained relationships. Yet it was a necessary step to ensure honesty and fairness within the family, and as I outlined my approach, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. A recognition that taking responsibility for action, even when consequences are uncertain, carries its own power and dignity. Amelia stood quietly, nodding in understanding. And for the first time I sensed genuine collaboration instead of competition. A fragile truce forming from the chaos, and I felt the tension in the room shift slightly, though the air remained charged with anticipation because the confrontation ahead was far from over, and I knew we would all need courage, patience, and clarity to navigate the fallout. I also understood that my relationships would change, that loyalty and trust would be tested, and that the story of our family was now entering a chapter defined by transparency, consequence, and difficult choices. But the beginning of a deeper understanding of who I am, what I value, and how far I am willing to go to protect integrity, fairness. Looking back on everything that happened, I realize how fragile trust can be, how easily assumptions can mislead us, and how important it is to act with integrity even when the stakes feel impossibly high. Because decisions are never just about right or wrong, they ripple through relationships, emotions, and futures in ways we cannot always predict. And I now understand that protecting family does not mean avoiding difficult truths, but rather facing them with courage, clarity, and care, even when it is uncomfortable or frightening. The ordeal with Amelia, my uncle, and the forged documents taught me that patience and observation are as vital as action, that listening before judging can prevent unnecessary pain, and that empathy can coexist with firmness. Because seeing another person's motives does not excuse wrongdoing, but it can guide how we respond in a way that preserves dignity and trust. I learned that responsibility is heavier than it appears when you are tasked with not just protecting what belongs to you but also safeguarding relationships, boundaries, and moral principles, and that every choice carries consequences, some immediate, some long-term, that can shape the course of lives in unexpected ways, requiring careful reflection before we act. I also saw that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to step forward despite it, to confront deception, and to restore balance even when the path is unclear. Because taking responsibility for truth is an investment in the kind of person we want to be, and the type of family we hope to nurture. As the days passed after the confrontation, the house felt lighter, conversations became more honest. And I noticed small gestures of reconciliation, not just from Amelia, but from my uncle and even myself. Because facing challenges openly allows healing and clarity to emerge. And the tension that once felt suffocating slowly transformed into understanding, reflection, and a renewed sense of purpose. Reminding me that even the hardest lessons carry wisdom if we are willing to accept them. I think about how easily I could have made a different choice, how hesitation or fear might have allowed the deception to continue. And I wonder how many times in life we avoid necessary confrontation because it feels easier than the discomfort it brings yet. I also see that acting thoughtfully guided by empathy and principle can turn a crisis into an opportunity for growth and connection, showing that integrity is not just a moral concept, but a practical tool for navigating complex human relationships. Now, sitting quietly in the living room where so much unfolded, I feel a calm clarity that was impossible in the heat of conflict. A sense that the experience has strengthened my understanding of trust, responsibility, and boundaries, and I cannot help but turn the thought over in my mind and quietly ask the audience, the ones who might watch this story and relate to its struggles, what would you have done in my place? And how far would you go to protect integrity, family, and truth when confronted with deception, greed, and the impossible balance of justice and compassion? Because these are questions without simple answers. Yet they define who we are and what we choose to become when faced with challenges that test every part of us.